What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. In today's episode, I'm going to be walking you through kind of just basics to garden planning and just kind of answering some of your questions and stuff that have come up around the topic of garden planning, because I was originally going to have you outside with me. We're going to be talking about composting. However, just because it's nice and warm does not mean that the weather still wanted to cooperate. Yes, it was about 40 degrees today. However, it was also 100% chance of rain. So could not necessarily make it outside today. It's kind of a dreary, really wet, muggy day. So I said, you know what? Let's come inside, still make something happen. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about garden planning, because what else can you do on a nasty cold winter day that's also raining? And that's what I love about days like this, is that when I get a chance to do some garden planning, it's days like this that are just that are perfect for it. Candles lit, nice cup of coffee, and just hanging out in silence and enjoying kind of the therapy that is planning next year's garden. So I wanted to kind of walk you guys through what I do, and like I said, answer some questions that you all have had. So the first thing that you have asked me is there anything that I use in terms of garden planning software or technology that helps me garden plan better? And there definitely are apps and websites that can help you garden plan better. However, I'm someone that I like to do things, I like to do things the simple way. And so I try to remove myself from technology. I know you're watching me on technology, I get it. But when it comes to the actual craft of gardening, I really like to be as hands-on as possible. And so I like to do things kind of the paper and pencil way. And so that way it just kind of, I don't know, it feels a little more therapeutic for me than grabbing a laptop that I'm on 3 or 4 hours a day anyways. So this kind of just detaches me from that. And I really like to use grid paper. Plus, grid paper is something that you can print extremely inexpensively. And so some of those gardening softwares, they're $5, $10, $20, even $90 I've seen for some garden planning softwares. It's kind of expensive. Even $5 is a little expensive, because this paper here is, really cheap. Now, I do use a website called, I think it's freeprintablepaper.com. I'm not quite sure what the name is, but I go to it every year, and I'll have the link in the description box below. It's a free site. You just download the PDF for whatever type of grid paper you want, and you can print it out. It's really awesome. Now, the type of grid paper that I use is they are 4 cells per inch. So it's basically 1/4 inch cells. And I really like that because it allows me enough space to put my whole garden on. This is my whole garden. I have 10 raised beds, and they are stacked up basically in rows of 2. So the reason also why I really like this is because when you have one, you can basically make one block 1 foot. And so you can kind of scale that up as well to your needs. And as long as you keep all the scaling the same, you're going to have a great time garden planning, because it makes it really easy to, just deciding what you're going to plant where, how much space you have to plant. And also, I'm going to also talk about some things that I don't see you all doing enough when it comes to garden planning that I really, really want you to start doing. I want to alleviate a lot of mistakes that I see happening around sunlight issues. It's so simple to incorporate that onto graph paper, and I'd recommend doing it because it's going to give you a visible, a visible key on what you should be planting where, because you're going to see it on paper before you get out in the garden, planted it, and then realize, well, shoot, I don't have enough sunlight here to really grow this plant adequately. So we're going to draw this. We're actually going to draw out the shadows on this piece of graph paper. Now we're going to indicate the shadows because it's going to allow us to know where there is areas of more sun or less sun, and that's going to really give us a good key as to what we should be planting where. So let's get that done. I'm not going to use black. I'm actually going to use a different color. I'm going to use a highlighter for this. This is just a black Sharpie I use because it shows up really nice and dark for you guys. But typically if I'm doing this, I'll use a pencil. That way I can erase it if I make an oopsie. But I used a Sharpie just for you all for the purpose of that. So I'm going to grab just any old highlighter. That way it's translucent. And so I can actually mark up underneath it. So that way where the highlighter is just kind of an indicator rather than just a black Sharpie that'll make everything black and you won't be able to see what's underneath it. So I'm going to grab that. I'll be right back. All right, so come around to the other side of the table here, kind of peek over my shoulder so you can kind of see what I'm doing when I'm casting my shadows. Now, the thing that you want to remember when you're casting your shadows is that shadows do move. And so I'm going to give my best idea as to where the shadows are going to be during mid-growing season. There's really no point in casting the shadows in winter because the sun is a lot lower in the sky, and that means the shadows are going to be a lot longer and they're going to be a lot more dramatic than they would be in the summer. So it's not really a good idea to cast your shadows in what you see in winter. And a good idea of what you can do is take what you have in winter and basically divide it by 2. That's essentially what you can do to get a rough idea, not an exact idea, but a rough idea of where your shadows are going to be, whether it's from trees, houses, fences, any obstacle that's going to block sun is going to block sun from your plants. And you need to know where that stuff is at. Otherwise, you're not going to properly plant your garden to the best of your ability. Okay, so what I've done is I've oriented my grid paper here in the way that my garden is oriented. So essentially this is where our house is, and this is where our fence line is, over here. And so what I have to do is I have to remember that our house is kind of over here in this corner of the grid paper. And it casts a shadow on an angle as the sun rises across. Now we're just going to kind of sketch this in. This is kind of just a rough sketch here. So it comes on an angle, and then since our house is rectangular, it casts more of a shadow like this. And then this is kind of just all fence line over here. So the fence also does not cast a huge shadow because it's on the north side. So the shadow is cast over here. So we don't have to worry about that. But all of this is going to have shadow cast during the morning. Okay? And then over here, this is actually where our neighbor's fence line is. And there's also a shed positioned roughly right here. And so this is going to get some evening shadow. And so we're going to have a shadow from the shed. The fence line is going to cast a shadow about here. And this is going to be at roughly 6 p.m. or so. So the sun sets around 7:30, 8 o'clock. So this is going to get some shade here. However, there also is, like I said, the shed is going to cast a shadow here. And it's going to come up roughly and kind of out like this as the sun sets. So all of this, and this is all, like I said, very rough. This is all going to be shadow here because we have the shed, which is obviously taller than the fence. So now I have what I have, which is the shadows. Okay, the shadows are so important because I don't want to grow a whole lot of stuff that is going to be obviously full sun loving because I'm going to have a shadow here, I'm going to have a shadow here. Anything that does not have a shadow, I have found to get about 9 to 10 hours of sun, which is great. So that's where I'm going to plant. You know, I have, for instance, in this bed right here, I have perennial strawberries. So just kind of abbreviating. So I also have strawberries here in this bed. These are perennial. Okay, I can't really move these beds. So that also leaves me with the remainder of beds that I can work with. And I know I have a trellis here. This is a cattle pedal trellis, so I can mark that. And I also have a cattle panel trellis here. I can mark that. So I have two cattle panel trellises, and I can better kind of gauge what I should be planting where because I also have my fruit trees over here. And so, yeah, you can see it there. Sorry about that. So you can better see kind of what I'm talking about, where you have some shade here. You want to avoid those areas with full sun loving plants because this area right here is only going to get about 5 to 7 hours of sun, which is okay for growing tomatoes. You can grow tomatoes in that, but if I have all of this other space, you know, why not? So I'm going to be planting. I planted tomatoes here last year. True, they got a little bit of shade, but they did okay. I'm gonna be moving this year tomatoes over to this bed. And these beds here are 40 square feet. And so I know that if each tomato needs about 2 square feet, I'm going to get about 20 plants in this bed right here. I grow them vertically up stakes, so obviously depending on your growing style, that's going to change. So I'm going to grow tomatoes here, and I'm going to get 20 plants in that bed. And also, I'm going to plant tomatoes in a different bed. I'm going to plant tomatoes in this bed right here. Now I had actually, oh, I can't do that. I have garlic here. So, yep, I have garlic in this bed. And so this is going to be used up until about, this bed space is going to be used up until probably about early July. So I'm going to plant either a kind of a really quick turnaround crop and then a fall crop, or I might just plant a late maturing warm weather crop like zucchinis or cucumbers or something like that. And then, so I'm left with this space here in full sun, but I don't necessarily want to put tomatoes and tomatoes right next to each other. That just kind of tends to be a recipe for disaster. So because I have a lot of shade here and I have a lot of shade here, what I may do is I may keep strawberries in this location that did fairly well. This definitely gets the least sun of all these locations because our house is really close to these beds here that need full sun. So because our house is so close to these beds and the shed itself, the only time this shadow is cast over top of this bed right here is, as the sun is the lowest point in the sky before it sets. This is kind of the most extreme shadow that's cast. So because the shadow is shorter as the day is, closer to noon. So this shadow kind of creeps further this way. So this bed right here is pretty safe. So I think I'm going to plant tomatoes here again. And a lot of you are probably wondering why would I plant tomatoes in the same place I planted tomatoes? We have a video about crop rotation and why it's really not necessary for the home gardener. And so I'm going to plant tomatoes here because I know that if I amend it properly, if I put lots of fertilizer and I make sure that the plants are pruned up and growing vertically, they're going to be pretty disease-free. And I should not have any problems with blights or powdery mildews. So I'm not worried about putting tomatoes in the same location. Now we did peppers here in this bed. They definitely suffered last year because of the lack of sun. That was certainly a mistake of mine because I had planted out the rest of the garden and I got kind of caught saying, well, I need some, I need some peppers. So I ended up throwing them in this bed here, and that really did not do so well. So I'm going to put peppers in this bed here because that's another full sun loving plant. And I'm going to plant maybe 2/3 of the bed out. The other part of this bed, I want to dedicate to my root crops. So I'm going to dedicate, that's where I'm going to use these squares, which is really nice. If I'm using a full bed, it doesn't really matter. But if I'm dedicating, a third of a bed or a quarter bed, I can use these squares to then say, okay, I'm going to plant this block. I'm going to divide this up into quarters. And I'm going to plant carrots here. I'm going to abbreviate those. I'm going to plant beets here. Let's do beets here. So beets in half the bed, or half that quadrant, and then more carrots there. So then I'm left with this bed here, this bed here, this bed here, and this bed here. Now I'm going to do, I do have a trellis here. Then I'm going to do cucumbers right there. And I do have some perennial plants right here. I have some butterfly bush and or bee balm, and I also have some oregano here. So this space is kind of just taken up. I don't really want to plant any more here because it gets too cluttered up in the summertime. Over here I have pretty much this whole space open, but I think I'm going to dedicate this to lettuce. And the reason why is because this gets a decent amount of shade here. And I'm thinking that during even the warmer parts of summer, I can still grow lettuce here all year. So I'm going to dedicate this whole bed to our lettuce bed. We eat a lot of salad. And by lettuce, I mean, I'm going to plant probably some lettuce, some spinach, some mustard. It's going to be like our salad bed, more or less. So I'm going to get a lot of different stuff here. And also, I think I'm going to plant in this bed, I'm going to plant, so each 4 square feet is going to be a zucchini. And I'm going to plant a golden zucchini, GZ. I'm going to plant another GZ there, another golden zucchini. That's one of our most favorite varieties of summer squash, or zucchini, I should say, is the golden zucchini. And then I'm going to plant a Black Beauty zucchini. So just a black zucchini. I'll put BZ for black zucchini. I'll know what that means. But I'm going to plant just 4 zucchini plants. That is more than enough for us and our family, and still probably will give some away to friends and family. So then I have some free space here where I need to plant some beans. Now, I really do not think this is a good area for beans, and the reason why is just because this area right here is the lowest part of our yard. Beans really do not like a lot of wet feet, and so I'm going to actually plant the beans over in this bed right here. Now we do have some hyssop running down the center, so I'm going to plant, and they only need about 1 square foot, so I'm going to plant a bean there. I'm going to plant beans around the perimeter of this bed here in each square. I do have this section already planted out with a artichoke. That is a perennial artichoke there. So I'm going to plant, as many beans as I can around the perimeter. And then because I do have quite a bit more space here, I can do some other playing around with things that I don't really, nothing really comes to my mind right now what I desperately need to plant. And this is kind of more of a broad picture of how I plan my garden, just because I like to plant in blocks. I like block planting. I do throw, the occasional plant here and there, but I like block planting because it gives a little structure. I like structure. I mean, this is really what I do. Nothing special, nothing really crazy, but I do think it's a really important take home to put the shade, or the shadows and the shade, because that's something that obviously really will help give you a visible cue of I should not plant something here. I should not plant something here that needs full sun. So that's really it. There's really not a whole lot more to it. Now, when it comes to companion planting, we have a video on companion planting and why we don't recommend it. And that's because there's really not been any hard evidence as to the fact that a certain plant will benefit a certain plant. There is smart plantings, which we've talked about. There's plantings that are they're very compatible, but they're not necessarily companions. If I were to plant garlic next to carrots, any allium is going to help carrots from carrot fly, but the garlic is not benefited by the carrots, so they're not really companions. It's just smart. Another prime example would be tomatoes and basil. I might put basil around the edge here, but I might also put thyme. I might also put sage. You never know. Whatever my emotion is at the moment is kind of where I just put things. And so basil and tomatoes, the basils don't benefit, or the basil does not benefit from the tomatoes, but the tomatoes benefit from the essential oils that the basil gives off. So again, not really a companion plant, but it's something that they go together. They're compatible. And so a lot of people worry about that when they're garden planting, and that's just not something we found to really matter that much. So the biggest thing is get your garden down on paper, get it down by the square foot, and figure out the scale that your garden is going to be. 1 inch equals 1 square equals 1 foot, or one whole inch equals 1 foot. However big your garden is, get your scale together, and that will really dictate your planting space and how much space you have available. So that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. And I know this video didn't have a whole ton of substance, but I hope you at least got some inspiration from it nonetheless. Now, I do also want to mention that we wrote a really good blog post. Caitlin, that works with us, actually wrote an amazing blog post on the Clyde's Garden Planner. Now, this is a really amazing tool. I wish I had it in front of me, but it is a sliding garden planner that shows you when you should be planting stuff and how much sun they need, spacing, and things like that. It's an amazing tool that's going to help you to kind of, in combination with this, kind of plan your garden better. And then also the final thing that I wanted to just kind of mention was our book. So a shameless plug to our book. This has been out now for a little bit over a year. It's an absolutely amazing tool that's going to help you to plan your garden, but also to just plant smarter so your garden works for you rather than you work for it. And I'm so passionate about this book that I just had to mention it because I think it's an amazing gift for people, but also it's a great resource for gardeners as well. And so I wanted to let you know that I will have a link to it in the description box below. I really want to get this into as many hands as possible because this book is by far one of the best gardening resources that you can get your hands on because it doesn't have a whole lot of fluff. It doesn't have a whole lot of filler. It really just has the information you need to get a garden going and to work as little as possible in it so you can spend more time enjoying it. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel reminding you to grow big or go home. We'll catch you all later. See ya.